So for those of you who don't know me or who I haven't met yet or who are already tired of me, my name's Chris Gates. I'm the Recovery and Alumni Manager out at the ranch. I teach the 12 steps and help run the Alumni Association. And tonight I'm here to talk to you about relationships and how you can get better at them, specifically romantic relationships, but relationships in general with other people, and how I've used the steps to go from being insane and undateable to having a marriage that's relatively mind-boggling even to me. 13 years. I've been married to the same woman for 13 years. We've never even had a serious fight. Not because we're saints, but because both of us know how to do this stuff and how not to engage when the other person is struggling. And I want to talk about some of that tonight. So starting with, how many of you guys have a history of relationship problems? Doing the same thing over and over with different people. When I got sober and I was doing inventory on all my old failed relationships, I realized that the only thing that all those poor women had in common was I picked them. So if I want different results, I've got to learn how to do something differently. But unless I can look at what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, how am I going to know what to do different? How do I figure out what's actually different and what's just rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, right? And as I stayed sober and as I've worked the steps, I realized that the main causes of problems in relationships are resentments and fear. And underneath that is a mistaken idea about what relationships are actually for, and mistaken idea about what happiness really is and where happiness comes from. I was taught as I did the inventory that there are only two reasons to have sex, only two reasons to be in a relationship. To make babies and because it's fun. Hard to argue. God gave us sex to make more people. He made it feel good so we would do it. But if I'm using the act of sex or a relationship involving sex for any reason other than making babies or pleasure, I have to look at it and see what I'm trying to get from it. So how do I grow enough spiritually so that I can have a successful relationship? The number one tool to do that, inventory. I know everybody shrugs. It's inventory. It all goes back to inventory. I have to be able to look at what's going on so I can figure out the truth about the situation. Big Book says resentment is the number one offender. I always break this word down because resentment isn't just anger. It's re-feeling any old negative emotions. If you break the word resentment down, the re means again, and the Latin root of the sentiment part means experience or feel. It's the word sentare. So a resentment is re-feeling or re-experiencing any old negative emotions. It's thinking about a situation from the past, and the past can be 10 years ago or 10 minutes ago, and having a negative emotional reaction right now in the present moment. So I need to know how to do the inventory so I can look at what these resentments are about. These are the inventory sheets we use. If you're not familiar with how to do a 4-step, there's a 4-step workshop online. At the alumni website, AwesomeRecoveryAlumni.com, there's a whole video that'll walk you through the entire process and teach you how to do it. The whole point of doing the inventory is to be able to look at this third column and see what was threatened by the behavior. The reason I'm upset, the reason my significant other is upsetting me is because they just did something that's threatened me in one of these 7 basic areas. And I got to look at what's been threatened by what they're doing. I'm resentful at my wife. The reason is she fussed at me in front of other people. This affects my self-esteem, my opinion of me, my emotional security, my ambitions to have a successful relationship, my pride, other people saw her do it. And I have to keep looking at what's being threatened in here. I talk all the time about how I believe spirituality is not a choice. I think every human being has a spirit, just like they have a body and a mind. All I mean by spirit is that part of you that just exists. Not the you that's the story of all the things that you've done or the things that have happened to you, but that part of you that just is down inside. And I also believe that there are 3 levels of spiritual existence in life. The lowest is a state of dependence. The next level is independence, and the highest level is interdependence. So in a state of dependence, I'm depending on things outside of me going and being a certain way for my ability to feel safe and okay. Everybody in early sobriety is in a state of dependence. That's just what that looks like. About 2/3 of everybody running around out there without an addiction problem. It's part of why things are so weird out there right now. Everybody's running around with these ideas in their heads that if things don't go the way I believe they need to, we are all doomed. And everybody's solution is different, and everybody's fighting all the time. When I get into a relationship, it means my partner's also going to be in a state of dependence, because water seeks its own level. It's part of why we encourage people in early sobriety not to get in relationships. Because if I get in a relationship with somebody and they're in a state of dependence and I'm in a state of dependence, what ends up happening is when my partner gets spiritually unfit, it's going to make me spiritually unfit, because I don't have the tools for it not to yet. And when I get spiritually unfit, it's going to make them spiritually unfit, because they don't have the tools yet either. And it's like two people standing up in a canoe trying to dance out on a lake. It does not feel very stable, and one of us is going over the edge. You know, people always say, don't get in a relationship in early sobriety, but nobody ever explained why. I thought it was because they said so, or I didn't deserve it, or some other thing they weren't explaining to me. And then somebody sat me down and said, no, it's because you may not know how crazy this person is, but you know how crazy you are. And does two of you seem more stable than one of you at this particular moment? You know, and not so much, really. So if I keep doing the work and I keep growing spiritually, I start to depend more and more on God's power and direction and my own actions to fill those third column needs. I then move to a state of independence. Me and God filling my basic needs most of the time. God's power and direction, my own actions. When I get to that place, I'm getting my self-esteem from acting esteemably rather than convincing you I'm cool. I'm getting my emotional security from a connection to a higher power and the faith that with that connection I can walk through whatever life puts in front of me instead of trying to control every damn thing or hide from it and pretend it's not happening. I'm getting my pocketbook's not threatened by stuff all the time because I'm actually paying attention to what's going on with my money, and I'm letting go of the idea that everything would be okay if I just had enough money. Money's just a tool, and I'm starting to learn to be responsible with it so that stuff doesn't threaten my finances all the time. My ambitions start to be based on what God would have me be and not what will make me look cool or feel safe. My personal relations, my sex relations start being based on what I can give in a situation, not what I can get. My pride's based on being the person I believe I'm supposed to and letting your opinion of me be your problem. And as I continue to grow spiritually, I get to this place of independence. The beauty of that is I spent most of my life believing that I could never be truly happy unless I had a partner. I also spent most of my life believing that nobody was ever going to be interested in a dude like me. And I ended up getting in relationships that I had no business being in with people who didn't treat me well, and I stayed in them even though they were torturous because I couldn't be happy without a partner, even if the partner was the thing making me unhappy. But when I get to this place of independence, me and God filling my basic needs most of the time, there's no vacancy in my life. I don't need anybody to be okay. I'm already okay. And as I continue to grow spiritually, ultimately I get to a place of interdependence. That's where I can meet spiritual weakness and stay spiritually strong. This is not a naturally occurring phenomena. Evolutionarily, if you get sick at me, I will get sick back at you. You know, interdependence is where I can allow my partner to have a bad day and be spiritually unfit and not let him make me sick too. It takes work to get to that place. So I'm growing from dependence to independence. This is me, right there in the middle, or you. And these other folks, that's everybody else in my life. And this circle is my third column, all those needs in that third column. And every time anybody takes an action that crosses over inside that circle, it threatens me. Does that make sense? It's like a boundary. The problem is, this circle also represents that state of dependence I've been talking about. The big gray circle is supposed to be the little white one. And as I continue to do inventory and continue to separate the real threats in my third column from the make-believe threats, as I'm doing regular 10th-step work, not only do I look at my part in the character defects, I go back and look at what I checked in the third column and ask myself, was it reasonable to have these things threatened by what just happened? Sometimes it totally is, and sometimes it totally isn't. And as I begin to separate the real threats from the imagined threats, I begin to depend more and more on God's power and direction and my own actions to fill those needs. And as I do that, over time, this circle begins to shrink. And eventually I move from that state of dependence to the next level of spiritual existence, independence. Me and God filling my needs most of the time. The beauty of that is, those two guys at the top can keep acting the same way they've always acted. They're never going to threaten me again. In fact, they weren't a real threat to begin with. They just felt like one because I was needy out there in the world trying to make myself okay. This guy down here at the bottom, though, he's still coming up here where it's only safe for me and God to be. And I can't make him behave differently. But I can take my circle and move it to hell somewhere else. Because if I keep going around somebody and they keep making me spiritually unfit, I have to examine the story I'm telling myself about why I have to be around them. Because it's a story. I don't have to be around anyone. I don't care if you're my boss or my mother or the love of my life. If I can't be around you and stay spiritually fit, I can't be around you, at least not right now. But once I understand this, it gives me my power back. I'm not powerless over people, and neither are you. I choose who I let come around me the second time. When somebody shows me who they are, my job is to believe them and not expect them to be somebody else next time, and adjust my spacing accordingly, because that's the only control I have over you, is how close I get to you. And it lets people exist on a continuum, where there are people I let right up next to this inside circle where I'm vulnerable, because they have shown me over and over again they're not going to hurt me on purpose. My wife, my brother, a couple of good friends. There are other people who are so sick they're way over here somewhere. They're not even on the page. I still care about them. I can't be around them. Most people are in the middle, family, friends, coworkers. We get along all right. One of them starts getting spiritually unfit, acting like an ass. I can just slide back a little bit, not be around them until they get better. And when they get better, we'll hang out some more. And if they don't, well, at least they're not pulling me down with them. Because I can't lift you up spiritually. You can only pull me down. That's just the simple truth of it. I would love to be able to raise everybody up around me spiritually, but it can't be done. I can barely do it for myself. And if I try to pull you up out of whatever mess you're in, it's going to pull me right down there too, and I may end up relapsing. It's one of the hardest things to learn in recovery. One of the things that's the hardest to teach when they're teaching people to be lifeguards is when you jump in the water and you're trying to save somebody from drowning, you swim out there, you put your arms around them, and you say, stop struggling and let me swim for you. If they won't listen and they won't stop struggling, you got to let them drown. Otherwise, they're going to drown you too. If you're close to somebody and they start struggling and spinning off and you start feeling like you're not going to be okay unless they're okay, you got to let somebody else help that person. Otherwise, it's going to pull you right down into addiction too if you're not careful. So I'm walking through this process and I'm continuing to grow. So I'm doing lots of inventory daily. I met a man when I was about 14 months sober who had an unbelievable marriage. He'd been married to this woman for about 10 years, and she would happily tell you that her relationship with God was more important than her marriage to Jeff. He was very successful in his business life, doing something he loved, and his spiritual growth was still the thing that most interested him. So he became my sponsor, and I asked him if he would show me how to have a relationship like his, and he said, sure, but you're in a state of dependence. Let me show you how to do inventory. You've got work to do. And so I did that work every day, 10th step, over and over and over for 10 or 11 months. Filling out the columns. The whole point of the columns is to get to these last two columns, the fourth column and the fifth column, my wrongs and the character defects that drove those wrongs. Once I've done that 10th step, and I've seen my behavior that was ineffective and the character defects behind it, how I become entirely ready for God to remove those defects is I imagine what it would look like to be their opposite. In this specific situation, what would it look like to be unselfish and honest and God-seeking and courageous in a situation where I was just selfish and dishonest and self-seeking and frightened? In that specific situation, what would it look like? So that I know what I'm asking my higher power for help with in step 7. I don't know what it looks like to be unselfish all the time, but being unselfish and courageous and considerate as I deal with my wife while she's struggling with some family issues, that I can get a vision of. It makes me super uncomfortable when she struggles. But if I rush over and fix her, try to fix what's wrong with her, I don't ever learn to trust her. I don't give her the space to show me she can fix it herself. And if I rush over and fix what's wrong with her, I also don't give her the space to show me she's not going to fix it herself. So I never leave her. I need to stay on my side of the street and let my partner show me who they are. I need to learn to trust them. That was hard in the beginning of our marriage because both of us had a tendency to be in relationships with people who would light themselves on fire and just stand there and make it their partners, make it my fault, make it her fault, trying to fix the problems. In our early relationship, we had to make a conscious decision to stay on our own side of the street and just be uncomfortable and scared and let each other show each other that we were going to ride our own ships. It was okay. It still causes me discomfort when she's struggling spiritually, but I'm not afraid anymore because she's gotten right again, right in front of me over and over again for 13 years. And I've done it for her too. She loves me and it causes her distress when I struggle, but she doesn't need to do anything because I'm going to be fine. And she knows that from experience. So I'm using this information to figure out the opposite so I can go and be that guy next time. I'm also doing a lot of fear inventory. I get a lot of fear around my relationship. My wife is a citizen. Like when I met her, she was a citizen. She had like a job and a house and a car and 2 little baby girls, and I was out of my frickin' mind, barely employable. 4 years later, when we started dating, it never occurred to me that she might be the one who couldn't do this. Like I asked her if she would date me. We had been friends for a while. And she said, yeah, and I just assumed I was the one who wouldn't be able to hold up my end of the bargain. And then about a month into the relationship, I realized that she was so scared she might bolt. And I still have to do fear inventory on my relationships. You know, I still get afraid. I still think I'm going to let them down. I still think fear comes up. It just does. Just like resentment. I have to do the fear inventory so I can see what it would look like to show up without the fear. Fear causes me to develop ineffective coping mechanisms. I do a bunch of crap that makes me a little less afraid, but it never makes me unafraid. So I got to take that information from the 4th and 5th column through steps 5, 6, and 7 so I can figure out what it would look like with the help of my higher power to show up and do this thing the right way so I can stop being afraid of it. There's also the sex inventory. This isn't about just the act of sex. It's about relationships. Who did I hurt? What did I do? Why did I do it? What was I trying to get in the 3rd column? The examples I always use is, who did I hurt? Sally. What did I do? I acted like I wanted a relationship when I just wanted to get laid. Why did I do it? Emotional security and self-esteem. I had been on about a month-long run. I was not feeling particularly proud of myself at that juncture. She was awesome. If I wasn't leaving on tour in a couple of days, I would have wanted to try and have a relationship with her, but there's no point in starting something I'm going to screw up the next city I get to. But I was totally willing to lie to her because I had this idea in my head that maybe if this hot chick likes me, maybe I'm not as scummy as I think. I'm sure we had a good time, but I know I didn't get self-esteem or emotional security out of it because you can't get that from sex. And I lied. So I walk out the other side in worse shape than I walked in. The other example I always use is, who did I hurt? Elizabeth. What did I do? I stayed in our relationship 9 months after I knew it was over. Why did I do that? Emotional security and pocketbook. I kept telling myself I can't afford to move out. When the bigger truth was I was more afraid of being alone than in that shitty relationship. You know? I stayed in a lot of relationships that weren't going well because I had that belief that unless I'm in a relationship, I will never be truly happy. And so I get in these crappy relationships because I'm working with this scarcity model. Like I have to take what's offered. I don't get a say. You know, if they're showing me attention, I better latch on because nobody else is going to want me. I've never been single unless I wanted to be. And yet I am certain nobody wants me. And so I get into these stupid relationships and I try and keep them going even though they're killing me. Because of this bizarre belief that I can't be happy unless I'm in a relationship. So I've done the work. I've grown to this place of independence. Now what? After I'd done 10 months worth of inventory with my sponsor, he told me, I think you're in that place now. I think you're in a place of independence. And then he began to walk me through a process. The first part of that process was sitting down with pen and paper and writing out an ideal. He told me he wanted me to write down every single quality I want in a partner. Go wild. Anything you want. I thought it was stupid. There's no way that if this person exists, she'll ever want to talk to me. So I went wild. He had me divided into 3 categories. Trivial stuff like hair color, tattoos. Things that seem like they're important, which for me was like taste in music and movies and a passion for the arts because those were things I was passionate about. And then things that were deal breakers. Like I knew I wanted children. So if the woman doesn't want kids, it doesn't matter if she's perfect because I know I do. So I wrote this list. I thought it was stupid. And I sat down with him and I went over it. And then he told me my next job was to go out and begin dating people without sleeping with them, which I'd also never done. All of my relationships were one-night stands that lasted 2 years. You know, drunken hookups And then you hook up again later in the week, and then you hook up again the next week, and the next thing you know, you're living together. 3 months later, you figure out if you even like each other, and a year after that, you're fighting over stuff neither of you even wants in the breakup. Over and over again. Turns out, if I'm in a state of independence, me and God filling my third column needs on a daily basis, there is no lack in my life. I don't need a partner to be happy. I'm already happy. I had to do this just so I could stay sober and be functional in my own life. And then I hit this place where I'm already happy. And if I go on 4 or 5 dates with somebody and I'm getting to know them, which is what dating is supposed to be, and they're not really checking all the boxes I'm looking for, I can just stop going out with them and I don't owe them anything. I'm still friends with all the women I dated over the next year. And I'm happy I'm not with any of them, and they're happy they're not with me. Not because there's anything wrong with any of them, it's just none of them were a good fit. And every time I go out with somebody, I grow a little bit. And I learn a little bit more. First woman I went out with, this woman Kim, like 4 days after I went over this thing with my sponsor, I went out to see this band I love at the Continental Club over here, and I ran into this girl Kim. I had known her when she was 16 and I was 20, and she was part of this crew of high school kids that was coming to the punk shows my bands were playing. But now she's 36 and I'm 40, and that's not a weird age difference. She's at the show with her mom and her sister. 2 of the things on my list was likes the same music as me and has a functional relationship with their family. Not necessarily close relationship, because I've met some of your families. But I'm 40 when I'm doing this, right? So any woman that I'm dating is going to be at least 30. And if she hasn't figured out how to stand in relationship to her family, even if they're so sick that what that looks like is I don't talk to them ever, that indicates a level of chaos that I just can't get involved in. And she's there with her family watching music I love. She's got 2 things on my list right off the bat. I asked her out. We ended up going out every day for a week. And then she called me and said, I can't go out with you anymore. I said, what did I do? And she said, nothing, you're awesome, that's the problem. I moved back here to go to nursing school, and I've already blown off 2 deadlines in 1 week just to hang out with you instead. I can't do that. And I went, okay, I get that. And I went home, and I was a little bummed. But I sat down with my ideal and said, okay, I get it. I didn't think this person existed or would be interested in me. What else? What else did I learn here? And I realized that Kim had 2 qualities that I completely forgot to put on my list. She liked me, and she showed me that every time we were together. I had been in one long-term relationship with a person who didn't even treat me like they liked me most of the time. They treated strangers better than me, always. And she was also very physically affectionate. I grew up in a very physically affectionate home. And I was in a long-term relationship with a woman who didn't like to be touched much. That's not good or bad, but it's terrible for both of us because we were just a terrible match for each other. Oh yeah, likes me and shows it, physically affectionate. Those should be on my list. And I keep dating people, and I keep getting to know them, and I keep learning more about what I'm looking for. And I keep growing because on the 3rd date I'm naming children, and that's inappropriate, And I keep growing, and I keep fine-tuning what I'm looking for, and I keep growing. And then I met this woman. She came to my home group. Never seen her before. She was everything I wanted and stuff I didn't even think to put on the list. And after 2 weeks of hanging out in my home group with her, I finally got up the courage to ask her out, and it turned out she was married. I was bummed. I went back to my sponsor. I told him, dude, every time I meet the kind of person I think I could build a real life with, they're already in a relationship. All the good ones are taken. And he looked at me and said, you're right, they are. All the good ones are taken. But they make new good ones every day. And when you've grown enough spiritually to just barely be ready to hold up your end of an interdependent relationship, you will meet somebody who's ready to do that too. And you'll learn how to do that together. And that's what happened. I remember the moment I met my wife. So does she. Something happened in that moment. Like there was a connection made the very first time we talked. And then something else happened immediately following that, which was both of us were instantly a little sad that this person would never be interested in me because we're so different, because we come from very different worlds. So we were just friends for 4 years. That was God doing for us, because when we met, she was 2 months out of a divorce, and she had twin girls who were barely 2 years old, and I was 13 months sober and out of my frickin' mind. We'd have burned that down in a heartbeat if we tried to do it when we first met. But 4.5 years later, we had both been doing a lot of spiritual work. and we were ready. Just barely. The thing I love about this is it's a process. It's not just sitting around hoping for the best. 13 years before my sponsor started walking me through this process, he was a homeless junkie, been to rehab 8 times. And then he got sober. And about 2 years into his sobriety, his sponsor walked him through the exact same process he just walked me through. I have now walked 3 men through it, and they're in long-term, happy, successful relationships. I'm walking a new guy through it right now who is certain it's a bunch of crap, but he's tired of what he's getting, so he's willing to play along. I'm certain you guys can have the same sort of relationship I have with my wife. If you do the spiritual work you need to do anyway just to be happy and effective in your own lives. And try not to get ahead of the curve, right? This is doable. There seem to be 2 other alternatives for having relationships in recovery. One is don't ever have a relationship in recovery. I see a lot of people in the room swearing them off forever. I was dangerously close to that at 18 months sober, but that was entirely based on a fear and a lie. It may be the best choice for some folks, but for me, it was a lie based in fear. I didn't know how to do it. I was terrified, so I'm just not going to try. Or I can have a series of relationships that are 2 years long that start in a bunch of heat and end in a bunch of flames. And I just didn't know if I had that in me. That's not what I wanted. I wanted what I have now, so I was willing to do the challenging work to get there. I think the reason marriages fail is because I get in a relationship thinking this person is going to complete me. And then when they don't, I get mad at them and want to go find another person because I thought it was the person that was going to make me whole. When it's not, it's a connection to God and getting good spiritual condition that makes me whole. I can't get that from another person. I have to get it from my higher power. Otherwise, when that other person has a bad day, it destroys me too. And that's not fair to them. My wife has to be able to have bad days without it destroying me. And the beauty of my relationship with my wife is I think we're going to stay together until one of us dies. But if I came home tonight and she said, I don't want to be with you anymore, I'd be all right. I'd be sad because I've imagined an amazing future with her. But I'd be okay because she's not where my ability to be okay comes from, ever. She stays on her side of the street and stays connected to her higher power. I stay on my side of the street and stay connected to my higher power. And when the 2 of us are hitting on all 8 cylinders, we both end up with a better connection to God than we can ever have on our own. But that's just nice. It's extra. I don't need her to be okay, and she doesn't need me. And I'm firmly convinced that if she left me and I could find another woman who was living under the same principles that she lives under, I could be just as happy with that other woman. It would be different, but it would be doable. And I think you guys can do it too. So let's say I'm in a relationship. How do I get better at it? What do I do with this now that I'm here? Most people see getting in the relationship as the finish line, and it's not. It's where the work begins. I can't tell you how much more inventory being in a committed relationship caused me to do than being single and wishing I was in one. So the first thing I got to remember is that I'm part of a team now. I think the reason most marriages fail is because they don't think of them as a team. It's 2 solo acts fighting for stage time, and when that gets old, screw this, I'm out. Families used to feed each other spiritually. Moms and dads and kids, they were all part of this spiritual team that looked after each other and fed each other spiritually. I think one of the accidental byproducts of the development of Western culture is we've become a little bit more self-centered every single generation since World War II. And by the 80s, late 70s and 80s, families weren't safe spiritual places. They were just 5 solo acts in the house fighting with each other. And that's easy to walk away from. The family broke down because everybody's becoming more self-centered. But if I'm going to be in a relationship, I have to understand I'm now part of a team. And that changes how I look at things. It's not me versus my partner. It's me and my partner. If we're having a problem, we have to discuss it as a team. I also have to learn to have team conversations, using the word we a lot, not you. How can we deal with this? There's also a process that my wife and I refer to as spiritual permission, giving each other spiritual permission. Here's what that looks like. First, I have to learn to stay on my side of the street. When my wife does something that irritates me, rather than going, hey, stop it, I pause. I leave the room if I can. I do some inventory on why it bothered me. I recognize that if she's acting in a way that's abrasive, it's because she's in a bad spiritual spot, not because she's being mean to me. Her actions are driven by her thoughts, and her thoughts are entirely controlled by her spiritual condition, just like mine, just like yours. So I can leave the room. I can do some inventory on it. I can go over that inventory with my sponsor. Then I got to learn to have uncomfortable conversations. Like, if it's something that's just happening and it's an off night or whatever, I can do a little bit of inventory. I can say a little prayer for her. I can get on with the day. We don't have to talk about that. I have to learn to never confront them when they're being an ass while they're being an ass. Because they're already spiritually unfit. The chances of getting anything done when they're in that spiritual condition are zero. All I can do is make it worse. But if a situation happens multiple times, and I have to inventory it multiple times, then eventually we're going to have a conversation about it because the team is not functioning well. And what I can do is I can sit down after I've done the inventory and I've talked to my sponsor. I can approach my wife and ask her if we can sit down and have a conversation. Not right now. When can we do this? Because I don't want to blindside her with it because I already know what I want to talk about and it's surprising her. So we pick a time. I'm free around 2 this afternoon, let's sit down. And then we sit down. Before I sit down, I do the 3 breath thing that a lot of you guys know. I get a little spiritually centered. And then we sit down and we talk. And I can tell her that I have noticed this pattern of behavior. And it's causing me problems. So what can we do to address this issue that's coming up? Not only were we able to correct the situation so we didn't develop these long-standing resentments with each other, but having the courage to have that conversation as a team and to go through those actions when the irritating thing is happening built a level of trust between us that I've never had in a relationship before. It's like we've been, like I said, we've been married 13 years and it gets easier every year. I've never been in a relationship that gets easier with time. But when you think about it, it seems like it ought to. And ours does. There's times when we look at each other and go, this is ridiculous. Like, can it really, surely one of us is delusional. Can it really be this good? And the answer is yes, it can. And I know it's not just because of us, because we're both just doing this process that other people taught us. This idea of spiritual permission is a big one. Because if I've given you permission to say a phrase to me, then when I'm spiritually unfit, I won't get more spiritually unfit and defensive if you say the right words. But nobody's more likely to get defensive than somebody who knows they're wrong. And so if I'm bitching about shit and being an ass and you point it out while I'm doing it, I'm just going to get defensive and make it your fault somehow. And now we're even less of a team than before you pointed it out. But there is a way to approach this stuff and to deal with it so that I can build this successful long-term relationship with a person that I care about. This is all slow going, but it's the same tools. Whatever new situation comes up in our relationship, it's the same tools, the same inventory, the same prayer and meditation, the same conversations with sponsors before we talk to each other. Life continues to grow and continues to change. We can encourage the growth in each other, understanding that the growth is going to cause discomfort and the discomfort is going to cause some malady on occasion and it's going to require work. And her growing to be a better version of her is going to make me uncomfortable along the way. But I can do my work. I want her to have a better life. I want her to have bigger and cooler and happier, and she wants the same for me. And we have a mechanism to make that happen. And that's the beauty of this, is it's very based in the steps. It's very much based in the tools you need to learn to use anyway, just so that you can feel happy and comfortable enough in your skin not to need to get high anymore. That's the goal here. The steps will do for me slowly what a bottle of booze and a shot of dope did for me quickly. And I got to get into the thick of it and learn how to do it so I can be happy and have some agency and some peace in my life. But once I do that, I can build really interesting relationships, not just romantic relationships, but I have better friendships now than I've ever had if you have questions about this or anything else, I'm not hard to find. They'll give you my phone number. You know, this video is going to end up on the alumni website eventually, so that, you know, later you can go, what the hell was that thing? But it's all the same tools. Happily, it's no new tools. New issue, new problem, same tools. Same inventory, same prayer and meditation, same trying to be of service to other people. In this situation, I'm trying to be of service to my partner by letting them have their own spiritual life and not trying to force them to be my higher power. You know, I got to get that solution that I've been looking for from a connection to my higher power and not try and wrestle it out of my partner.